Hey everyone, I'm Jojo Aquino and I'm a traveler, blogger, and photographer, and I write travel tips for female travelers at travelingpetittegirl.com. This month's content is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to share about myself outside of being a travel blogger because I think it's important for you to know who I am if I'm going to be sharing guides and tips with you. So this week's video is going to be based on a true story. I'm going to share about my experience of being in an abusive relationship, how I got out, how I recovered, and how I transformed it into a positive experience. So this is going to be a heavy video, and I promise you if you stick to the end, there's a happy ending. So get comfy with me because things are about to get very real and very raw, and for others, kind of triggering. And I'll let you know when the triggering parts are. I was 21 and I just moved to San Francisco to study photography, and I was really having the time of my life. You know how it is in your 20s, you're young, ambitious, ready to take on the world and try new things. I'm 27 now and I still am. So there I was in my tiny studio apartment and I get this message on Facebook from a childhood friend I had back in Guam. He said he was driving to San Francisco from Las Vegas, and knowing that I lived there, he asked to meet up. I hadn't seen him in 10 years and I thought it would be nice to see a familiar face, so I said yes. Later that week, we met up, and for the next few days we went around the city, went eating, saw the sights, talked to each other for hours. And right before he left, I realized I liked him. Like a lot. And it was weird for me to be crazy about someone so fast, but I thought it was exciting. So I told him I like you, and he seemed a little hesitant, but he said he liked me too, and then he went back to Vegas. For a whole month, we kept in touch and we talked on FaceTime every day, hours a day. Then he offered to fly me over to Vegas to see him. So I flew over for winter break, and for the next 2 weeks, he took me out everywhere, treated me amazing. We ate at all the best local spots, watched Cirque du Soleil shows, introduced me to his friends as his girlfriend, which got me really excited, and reintroduced me to his family since they already knew me. I thought things were moving too fast, but I was also really excited. I was thinking, well, I'm only here for a short time. I better make the most out of it, so I don't care if it goes fast. I was completely infatuated with him, but in a weird way, because it seemed like he was a nice, down-to-earth guy, but a few things were unsettling, and they were red flags I was too infatuated to notice. One of the red flags was what he told me about his previous relationship with his ex-girlfriend. According to him, pretty much every bad thing that happened in their relationship was because of her. And after they broke up, she started a new relationship and she still saw him at the same time. Here I was thinking, wow, she cheated on her boyfriend. Later on, I found out that it was probably traumatic bonding, and I'll get to that in a little bit. He even told me they got into a fight where she slapped him and he threatened to hit her if she did it again. So their relationship was definitely unhealthy. But by the way that he said it, it seemed like it was only unhealthy because of her, so I didn't really think much of it. The abuse started off very playful and very sneaky, like making jokes about me, poking fun about me, lighthearted things couples do, except it was all one-sided, and whenever I tried to make jokes about him, he didn't like it. Later on, it moved to playfully undermining my progress at school and as a photographer, playfully blocking the doorway, playfully locking the bathroom. Next thing I knew, he was playfully locking me out of my phone so I couldn't leave, and then playfully, yet forcefully, having his way with me in bed. I remember being pinned down and I couldn't move my arms or my body, and I had never felt so powerless, weak, and helpless in my life. And I didn't leave after that. Mind you, in between his outbursts of abuse, he was for the most part attentive and caring, just like the person he was when he was in San Francisco. And I didn't know abuse worked in cycles. First, tension builds. Second comes the explosion. Third comes the honeymoon phase, and then it repeats again. And the scary thing was, sometimes I knew tension was building, but I didn't know when the outburst would come, so it left me paranoid. I even thought of provoking him just to get it over with. And the more these cycles happened, the more I became attached to him, and the more he held me emotionally captive. This is called traumatic bonding, and this is the reason why it's so hard for people to leave abusive relationships. In other long-distance relationships I've been in, I'd always long for my partner, always feel excited about the next time I'm gonna see them, This was not the case for this relationship. Though I get a break from his physical abuse, he'd still find ways to get into my head. He'd manipulate me into buying things for him and told me what to do because apparently I was doing everything wrong in my life. And when I didn't want to talk to him, he would call and call until I answered. I didn't want him to know I was intentionally ignoring his calls, so I left my phone to ring and it would go off for what seemed like forever. So even with long distance, I never really got away from his abuse. When I thought things couldn't get worse, it did. After 7 months of dating, I found out he had been talking to another girl during the whole time we were together. He told me how much he liked her. I asked, "Does she know you have a girlfriend?" And then he said, "You're not my girlfriend." So in all the 7 months of me flying back and forth between San Francisco and Vegas, going out with you, holding hands with you, kissing you and all that stuff, and I was never your girlfriend? You introduced me as your girlfriend to your friends when I arrived. They ask you, "How is your girlfriend?" and you reply, and suddenly I'm not your girlfriend? And suddenly it was my fault again because he said it was my choice to fly to Vegas and he wasn't going to say no. Yes, it was my choice, and I also thought we were in a relationship. In that conversation, he took no responsibility. Later on, he confessed how he originally went to San Francisco to see the girl that he liked. She was visiting the city, so he drove the 14 hours from Vegas to San Francisco to see her. They didn't see each other as much, and apparently he didn't expect things to turn out the way it did with me. So, during the entire relationship, or what I had thought was a relationship, he always had feelings for someone else, talked to them behind my back, while at the same time abusing me. That's when I started to leave, or at least tried to. Leaving that relationship was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because of traumatic bonding, it took 6 exhausting months. I was so torn down from the abuse, I didn't know if I had much strength to leave. I had already been so isolated from my friends and family that I didn't know what support I could get if or when I left. And my self-opinion had been so broken down, I thought I'd be worse if I left. But I was suffering and I couldn't take it anymore. And the more I tried to leave, the more he sensed it, and the more he pulled all the stops to make sure I didn't. He started apologizing. He started promising to take me out and treat me better. And I knew that was all inauthentic because he was still unwilling for me to talk about my emotions for the things that he did to me. He just wanted me back under his control. So when I last saw him, I didn't tell him I was ending it. There was no way for me to predict how he would react, and I knew it would bring up another outburst. So when he dropped me off at the airport, I stayed quiet and told him, "I'll see you next month." I got on the plane, got back home safely, and that was the last time I saw him in person. But the bond was still strong and we still talked after. But I started to slowly reply to him less and less. After the relationship, I found myself very angry and only towards men. I hated them, never felt safe around them, always thought they had an agenda. I later realized that through therapy, the reason why I was angry at men was because I never had the opportunity to express myself during the relationship. Because whenever I confronted him, he'd either shut me down, told me it was my fault, or just didn't say anything. And those conversations always left me feeling overly sensitive. And maybe it was my fault, and maybe I was just overthinking it. I found out this was his way to manipulate me, and it's called gaslighting. It's where the abuser deflects any blame back to you. So as a result, you feel overly sensitive, paranoid, dumb, and anything else that causes you to doubt yourself. And along with anger, I was also becoming depressed and anxious. Like I had this permanent state of exhaustion no matter how much rest I got. And even when I spent hours in bed doing nothing, my heart would still beat really fast. I remember my first panic attack. I was standing in the bus with my head racing from the thought of him hurting me. And I started to choke up and cry, and I held it back. And I continued to hold it until I got back home. Once I closed the door behind me, I started bawling and hyperventilating, and I didn't know how to stop it. I was curled up in the bathroom. My head was getting light, my fingers were tingling, and I felt like I lost control and I was going to die. One day, I was scrolling through Tumblr and saw a post about this book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men. I ended up buying it, and oh my god, That's when things clicked. So at this point, I never knew I was abused. I thought an abused woman had bruises all over her body, and I didn't have any. But this book made it clear that what happened to me was abuse. And all the emotions I went through in that relationship was normal. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't overly sensitive. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't dumb. And I finally felt validated for the experience I went through. And I started to accept that everything that was my fault was never my fault to begin with. After reading the book, it suggested that I create an environment of love and support so I wouldn't find myself abused again. So I told my family and friends what happened, and I was scared they wouldn't believe me. But they did, and they understood why I isolated myself from them and made sure to support me from then on. They were also horrified to hear what happened to me. They always heard stories of these things happening to other people, but they never thought it would happen to someone they know. The book also suggested I see a therapist, so I started seeing one, and I'm so happy I did. My therapist was great. Every week for the next 10 months, she helped me take apart my relationship and put it back together in a way that left me so strong and so empowered to take my life back. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And little by little, I started returning back to the person I was before, just much more wiser and much more stronger. One of the things she was really helpful in was teaching me how to manage my depression and anxiety, getting back into dating, and confronting my abuser. It had been a month into therapy, and I told her my abuser still texted me and I still replied to him, so there was still some traumatic bonding going on. I told her the conversations always ended in him telling me what to do. And she explained to me that's how abusers are. Even after you've left them, they'll still pop back into your life to control you. And then she said, stop contacting him, and then you'll start to love yourself. If you don't let go of him now, all aspects of your life will be affected, like my school, career, dating life, my well-being. She taught me how to go about confronting him. She said to write a letter to him with no filter, write down everything that he did to me, and then rewrite a second version, removing emotion, cuss words, and keep it under a minute. And then call him unannounced, read my letter, and at the end say, so I don't want you to contact me anymore, okay? And after he says okay, I'll say, okay, bye, and then hang up. I remember being so scared and nervous, but I knew I had to do it. So I called him, asked if he was busy. He said he was with his friend and they just left the gym. So I said, well, it'll only take a minute. Is that okay? He said, okay. So I started reading my letter, and a few sentences in, he cut me off and started giving me excuses about himself. He said he was doing me a favor by texting me to make up for what he did. And in my head, I was like, excuse you, don't try to justify yourself and say you're helping me. So I cut him off to continue my letter, and he said, no, let me finish. So I let him finish, and at the end I said, all right, well, I don't want you to contact me anymore, okay? He said, okay. And I said, okay, bye. And then I hung up. He did text me later that night saying, hey, I realized I was talking about myself again. Can we talk again later? I knew that was another hook. I never replied, and 1 week later I changed my number, and I never heard from him again. Now all I had to do was express my anger in a healthy way, and thankfully I was already seeing a therapist for that. And the reason why my therapist wanted me to get his agreement to not contact me was in case he did, I can file a restraining order. Thankfully it never came to that. Back in another therapy session, I was talking about the anger I had, and my therapist said, so you're grieving and right now you're in the anger phase. I asked, how long is the anger phase going to last? She answered, until you get it all out. And it took 6 months. When it came to my anger, I thought of different ways of getting revenge. Things I would never actually do, but man, it felt so good to play out different revenge scenarios in my head. Then my therapist said, you can imagine all the horrific things you want to do to get back at him. But the real revenge is to take your anger and direct it towards your photography. Work hard on your skills so that you can be successful in your career. So I started directing my energy towards getting better as a photographer and registered myself into leadership programs. And when it came to my depression and anxiety, my therapist said I was spending too much time at home because I'd never leave for days at a time. I'd only leave to buy food. So her advice was, immerse yourself in multi-sensory experiences. Do something you don't just watch, but get to hear, taste, smell, and feel too. So I started practicing self-care like drawing, breathing techniques, eating healthy, getting 8 hours of sleep, showering, being kind to myself, seeing beauty in simplicity, and being committed to self-growth. I also went out to museums, movies, restaurants, parks, and then eventually getting into travel more, which later turned into my travel blog. She also said to exercise and feel strong again. I'd always wanted a strong and toned body, so I got really into weightlifting. Next thing I knew, I was lifting heavy things from the ground, lifting them over my head and on my shoulders, and now I have a body I'm really happy with. I feel great whenever I look in the mirror, and more importantly, I feel stronger. One day my therapist asked, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you at your ex? I said, I don't know. 9? Then I want you to go on 9 first dates with 9 quality men and see how angry you are at the end of that. So I started dating, and that was a whole nother journey in itself. She helped me with my dating profiles across different dating apps, how to present myself so I don't attract the wrong kind of guys. Apparently, I had a thing for domineering men. She said not all domineering men are abusive, but all abusive men are domineering. So for dates, she taught me how to psychologically read men, look at them straight in the eyes, ask them questions, watch their body language while they answer, observe how they treat me. And I felt like this is where my charm as a petite girl came as an advantage, because here I was at the table smiling, asking questions to get to know them. But little did they know I was watching them really close, and they had no idea. Actually, as a solo traveler, this skill was really helpful in reading people so I could figure out who to hang out with. By the 5th date with the 5th guy, I was no longer angry, and by the 7th date with the 7th guy, I met the guy who would later become my boyfriend. And I feel like if there was a guy to date after being in an abusive relationship, it was this guy. He was so sweet, so kind, so gentle, so generous, and so warm. He knew what to say to me whenever I got triggered. He was like a big teddy bear, and I always felt safe with him. We're no longer together, but he'll always have a special place in my heart, and I really wish him the best. My last therapy session was 4 years ago, and I'm 27 now. I still follow my therapist's advice, but not to recover and heal. After experiencing trauma like that, I became aware of how valuable it was to feel alive and to feel happy. So I spent more time doing what I love with the people I loved and less on material things. I love creating, and I've always loved multi-sensory experiences, so as a result, I travel blog, which allowed me to spend more time with my family, because without them, I wouldn't be where I am now. And now I found a new form of happiness, and that's helping others. And doing it in a way that leaves them feeling inspired, alive, and ready to take the steps to be their best self. Right after the abuse, I remember crying in bed and crying to God why such a thing had to happen to me. I didn't understand why, but I believe it's to fulfill a bigger purpose. And as horrible as it was, I'm glad God gave me these trials, because I'm completely unrecognizable from the person I was before. Thank you for being here to listen to my story. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and let me know what you got out of my story in the comments. And don't forget to check the description box for resources on abusive relationships. I love you guys. I'm here for you. Travel safe, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye!